Be Psalms 23. Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me, for your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with the oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and loving kindness will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
So years ago, the government set up a system to measure danger. So whenever there was a threat, they decided to set up the system to say, okay, what kind of defense level we should be at to determine how safe the nation would be. And I'm sure you've heard of it. It's called the DEFCON system. And there's 5 levels. DEFCON 1 is where everything's fine and everything's at peace. DEFCON 2 is where there's increased security and gathering intelligence and things like that. During the Cold War, we were at DEFCON 2 off and on through those years. DEFCON 3, the armed forces are kind of ready, and the Air Force in particular is ready to mobilize in 15 minutes. That happened during 9/11 and a few other times. We were at DEFCON 3. DEFCON 4, the threat is very high, and all the armed forces are ready. They're to be ready in 6 hours, notice. And that's only happened one time in history in 1962 during the Cuban Missile Crisis. That was about the time I turned 1. So the civilized world almost ended on my first birthday. But then DEFCON 1 is where nuclear war is imminent, and we've never been on that level. I'm so grateful that other than my first birthday party, the world has mostly been at DEFCON 5. What if it wasn't? What if every day was DEFCON 3 or 4? I mean, starting tomorrow was just always pretty close. At first that'd be that shock, but then we'd probably get used to it. But I think there'd always be this tension in you as you went about your day, and you'd never be able to relax or enjoy life and never have peace of mind. It'd be a horrible way to live, just constantly kind of looking up, wondering if this was it. It would be a horrible way to live. So pretend for a second, let's say for years now we've been at DEFCON 4, and that's, where it's really close to serious danger. And let's pretend like it ended yesterday. Now, even though everything's okay, you might still feel like it isn't, even though we can get together and say, yeah, it's over, we're all good now. It'd still be hard to let go of that tension. Even though everything's fine, you might for a while still be tense and not relax and not have peace of mind. And even though the danger is over, it'd be a horrible way to live because you'd be at that state of emergency all the time. And I think in a very real way, that's exactly how most people live. Most of the people you'll see tomorrow, even though the United States is at DEFCON 1, almost everyone you see tomorrow is at a level 3 or 4. Everybody's stressed out. If people from the 19th century or 18th century could visit now, they'd be so impressed by all the technology, but then they would very quickly notice something strange. Everyone is uneasy. There's constant anxiety. The majority, in fact, find ways to kind of tune out, whether it's through pills or screens or other kinds of distractions. Here in the 21st century, the best days that you can look back on, like last year, say, oh, that was a good day. The best days are when you escape your life, and that's not a good thing. If you and I take a step back and take a good look, even we can see it. Something's really wrong with our society. God has made arrangements for us to get to the next life, of course, and there's not going to be any worries at all. That's one of the things that I'm drawn to about heaven. But he has even made arrangements for us to kind of get a taste of that worry-free life even before we get there. I really believe that our minds were originally designed to have peace. And even during things like the Cold War or 9/11 or even the Cuban Missile Crisis, it's possible to have peace of mind regardless. Something that doesn't flinch when things come along. The Bible describes it as a steadfast mind. That your brain isn't scattered or panicky. And I don't know about you, I really want that. God designed us. Now, it's important to keep this in mind that God designed us that if there is a real threat, if your heart's, if you're in danger, your heart rate is going to speed up, your blood pressure is going to go up, and your system's going to dump adrenaline into your blood so you can react quickly to any kind of true threat. Your body kind of cranks up the volume on these things so you can react faster and you're able to deal with the situation. In fact, I had a friend in college. I was trying to think of a specific example, and this is the best one I could come up with, at least for now, is the short version is a bunch of people put paper in the hallway of the dorm as kind of a prank. They just filled it full of newspaper. And then somebody else thought it'd be pretty funny to toss in a match. And my friend was in his room studying. This is back when there were record players. And he was listening to a record, and he saw something was going on out in the hall. He opened up the door. There's a wall of flames. And his body just kind of took over. He turned around and dove out the window. Fortunately, he was on the first floor, but he took out the screen with him. The heat was so intense it melted the record on the turntable. His body reacted. It says, there's danger here, and all the things that I just described took over. That's a good thing to have to kind of keep you alive. This emergency system that you have designed, that's built into you, is great to have when there's an actual emergency, when there's an actual threat. But one of the worst things you can do is live at this emergency setting all the time. If you let your mind convince your body there's an emergency all the time, your heart rate goes up, your blood pressure goes up, and you can't talk and you can't pronounce words. And there's these constant bursts of adrenaline that kind of just give you these jolts, and it's not good for you. And that's what's going on for a lot of people. Their emergency system is on all the time. That's what's going on for a lot of people. And they don't know how to turn it off. Where I work at the school there that was mentioned earlier, there's an alarm system like a lot of buildings have. And once in a while, either something gets tripped or somebody forgot to turn it off, and it'll go off. And it is deafening. It is so loud. There's been more than once when we're trying to do school, and they're running tests trying to fix it. And you just can't function. You can't think straight. You can't really enjoy anything until that alarm is gone. And all kinds of research is being done to indicate that that's kind of how our stress affects us. We can't function clearly when those alarms are always going off. Research has been done to an extensive amount about chronic stress, a stress that's with you all the time. And it's not just that it's annoying, it does damage to your body, and I would believe damage to your soul. I think that's easy to figure that out. It's devastating. They're even finding, I don't know if you heard about this, and in Japan they've documented something called karoshi, and it literally means overworked death. People are dropping because of the stress, and their lives just switch off because of how intense that stress is. Most of us are living in chronic stress. Man has a problem of anxiety, has always had a problem with anxiety, but it's important to clearly see kind of our flavor of it. Maybe you could argue we've got more things to worry about. We're more aware of stuff, I guess you could say, and we're moving fast. I noticed that even this week as I'm trying to get ready to talk about this, I'm like, I feel urgent about this. And it creates, when you're moving fast, when you kind of get a zip from one place to the other to not be late, even though there's not urgency, it creates that sense of urgency in your body. And if that's going on all the time, your mind is kind of fooled. A lot of people are around, you're bumping elbows, and a lot of conflict, a lot of people being rude. Let me talk about that pretty soon. There's an interesting 21st century rudeness going on, whether it be the virtual crowd, all the online animosity. And then all the countless choices when they hand you a menu that's got 45 pages, you're kind of just stunned into immobility. You don't know what to do. Where do you want to eat tonight? I don't know. There's 1,000 choices. And it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming. But I think mainly we worry about what might happen because we know all the things that could go wrong. And a lot of things are lurking in the back of our minds. And that's just a big one right there, is what might happen. What if this happens? And it hangs out there. And it doesn't happen, but what if this happens? Our thinking is scattered. Our hearts and minds are aimed in every direction. Proverbs 14:30. I'm going to show you a few verses. I'll just refer to a few briefly for the sake of time, but depending on your translation, it talks about a sound heart is life to the body. That's Proverbs 14:30. Or a tranquil heart gives life to the flesh. The state of your heart, not necessarily your physical heart, but your emotions, your mental state, will have everything to do with your physical health. Your soul has an effect in that way, and it affects your soul. Psalm 51:10 describes a steadfast spirit. Steadfast being anchored down, not panicky. Isaiah 26:3 describes the steadfast of mind. So having a mind that's steadfast. So Psalm 23, we're going to quickly just go through this. It captures a steadfast mind. And there's some things about it that I learned recently that I thought I'd share with you in case you hadn't noticed. So if you want to just stick around, Psalm 23:1, that's where we'll spend most of our time here. And I bet you a lot of you can just quote it from memory. And, and as a result, since it's so familiar, sometimes we don't see what it's saying. But it says, the Lord is my shepherd. So that's the first thing you got to do, is make sure he's your shepherd. And that, by the way, that means he's in charge. You have to do what he says. The sheep don't take a vote. The shepherd doesn't ask the opinion of what the sheep want to do. The shepherd is in charge. That phrase, I shall not want, that's where our 21st century brains kind of get off track here. To be in want means to be in need. So if the Lord is my shepherd, I will have everything I need. That's what that's saying. All the important stuff's covered. You've probably been with somebody who's very prepared, over-prepared. They pack everything. Or they have a magic purse. And you say, you have any batteries or dental floss or a small telescope? And they're like, sure. They got everything there. It's kind of like that. Not only what you need, but what you need for specific situations. The right thing at the right moment. Here's Romans 8:32. And I keep coming back to this verse because this really presents such an accurate map of God's attitude towards us. Look at this, Romans 8:32. He who did not spare his own son, but delivered him over for us all, how will he not also with him freely give us all things? God gave you his greatest possession to make sure that you're safe. Do you really think he won't come through for you with other things, less important things? Psalm 23:2, back in Psalm 23, it says he makes me lie down in green pastures. And I think it's funny that it says he makes me lie down. He has to make you stop. And that's part of the problem today is we don't want to lie down. We don't want to stop. We don't rest. We're into the delusion that we're going to get caught up. Our shepherd says, if you're going to follow me, you're going to have to rest. I want you to stop. And not just rest, but rest in a good place. And I think we do this mentally. Look at Philippians 4, starting with verse 6. We'll stick around Psalm 23. If you want to just hear these, you can stay there. But here's Philippians 4, verse 6. Be anxious for nothing. So stop it. Don't be anxious. Be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all comprehension, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. I like that idea. It'll guard your hearts and minds. And then it goes on the next verse to even give a list. He says, think about this stuff that's honorable, stuff that's true. So I want you to think about these things. So in a way, I guess you could say sometimes you need some green grass under your feet, but you need to grow some in your head too. Some peaceful times and thoughts. And that's kind of hopefully what we're doing now is we're stopping our busy schedule. You could be right now you could be out there getting ahead. Getting out there and getting ahead of things, but a lot of stress comes from feeling like we're always having to hurry. We always feel like you have too much to do and you feel like you can't get caught up. It's important to do what we're doing right now and just stop. It says he leads me beside still waters. So again, if you follow this shepherd, the plan is green grass and quiet water. Sounds kind of nice. Here's Isaiah 30:15. This one is a big one too. Isaiah 30 verse 15. In repentance and rest you will be saved. In quietness and trust is your strength. Every day we need to spend some time in quietness and trust. And frankly, I have not scheduled that in often. These are the ingredients for peace of mind: quietness and trust. Verse 3, he restores my soul. Think about it, to restore something. Some of you restore maybe cars and things like that. It means to put it back in its original condition. Or maybe if something fell out of place, you restore it. You put it back where it belongs. I think the world can kind of knock your soul out of place, and our shepherd puts you back where you belong. It says he leads me in paths of righteousness. We're going to be spending time on green grass next to quiet water, but we're moving in a specific direction. Our lives are scattered. Too many choices. Our shepherd knows the way, and he knows exactly where he's going. And notice it says he leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. His plan, his direction. He's the shepherd. And that means a lot of times your plan's going to get bumped. So be ready. That's how it works with the shepherd. And that's okay, because the shepherd's plans are always better than yours. 23:4. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. This trip that we're going to take with the shepherd actually might take us through some pretty dark places. And the natural reaction is fear. But it says, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. A scary situation is a lot less scary if there's someone much bigger and stronger than you and tells you that everything's going to be okay. The rod and the staff, notice that. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. The reason you don't have to fear is because the shepherd is armed. I don't know if you know this. I don't think I fully appreciated this. When you see that picture with the shepherd and he's got the staff and stuff, that's a weapon. It's partly a weapon. It was designed for the shepherd's job. When the flock was attacked, the shepherd would use the rod as a weapon. And that curved part called the crook, that was if a sheep was in danger, he could actually hook around their body and lift them to safety. The reason we can face darkness and still be okay is our shepherd is there. He's prepared and equipped to handle anything that comes our way. This is where, every time I read Psalm 23, I said, this seems kind of off topic. But notice this, it says, you prepare a table before me. And I had all kinds of odd images here. It said that, I'm not sure how this fits in with the shepherd and the sheep thing. But it's important to notice the location of the meal. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Even though the threat is right there, there's no panic. I'm not stressed. It's kind of like, be like maybe going home and having dinner, and people are surrounding your house with torches and pounding on the door, and you're saying, so how was your day? Pass the salt. Everything's fine. Everything's fine. Even though they're right out there, even though they're leering in the window and crouched at the door, you have nothing to worry about. And then it says, you've anointed my head with oil. And there's a lot of ideas connected to this, but I thought I'd point out one that might not be as familiar is the idea of ownership. This idea of anointing the head has to do with the idea that you belong to him. We're told in more than one place where the Spirit is kind of like God's signature. One place is 2 Corinthians 1, 21 and 22, and he's described as a pledge. And when you write your name on something, you're saying, this is mine. If there's any question, we'll know who it belongs to. When he says, you have anointed my head with oil, he's telling the enemy, this one belongs to me. Don't even think about it. And then my cup overflows. That's a reminder that if we follow the shepherd, you won't have room for the blessings. It makes me think of Malachi 3:10. Remember, he says, go all in, test me. He says, I'll open for you the window of heaven and pour out for you a blessing until it overflows. You won't even be able to deal with all the good things that could come your way. That's fascinating to me, that there are things today and this week, this month, maybe the rest of my life, that I'll miss out on if I quit following the shepherd. Psalm 23:6. Surely goodness and loving kindness will follow me all the days of my life. And by the way, like I mentioned at the beginning, A big thing that robs us of peace of mind is fear of the future. What if this happens? And that leads to an enormous amount of stress, unnecessary stress, because 9 times out of 10, what if this happens? This doesn't happen. But when it says, surely goodness and loving kindness will follow me, that the word there is tied to the idea of a pursuit. These things are chasing you. Deuteronomy 28:2, talking about the blessings that he would give them. I love how he puts this in Deuteronomy 28:2. All these blessings will come upon you and overtake you if you obey the Lord your God. You won't be able to run away from the good things that I have in store for you. And then he says in Psalm 23, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. As a Christian, of course, I'm looking forward to being in heaven. I think all of us are. But in the meantime, one thing that will drastically change your state of mind is looking forward to things. You know how that is when you have a day and you're looking forward to something, things that could happen on the way to heaven, even before we get there. One of the biggest sources of stress is when we think about the future and we tend to focus on possible bad stuff and we think, what if this happens? If you and I stick close to the shepherd, we can focus on possible great stuff and be excited about life, and we can say, what if this happens? It's a whole different kind of what if. So I'll leave you with this. When we have a clear understanding of what we have because we're following the shepherd, it can completely change our way of thinking. You can turn the alarm off and relax, maybe for the first time in a long time. It might help to read this more often, Psalm 23. You get past, the poetry of it. Sometimes that is a distraction, I guess, in our minds or the world's spin on it, to get past that and really understand what this means. You and I are following the shepherd, and that means there are only good things ahead for us. Hope this is an encouragement to you while we stand together and sing.